Jennings wasn't supposed to be in Texas, definitely not on a horse, and absolutely not wearing boots that cost less than $1,000. He adjusted his Rolex under his flannel sleeve, glaring at the dust coating the leather strap. The private car had dropped him at Riverbend Ranch Retreat 2 hours ago, and ever since, the air had smelled like hay, horse sweat, and something that felt suspiciously like peace. He hated it. The board of Jennings Tech had forced his hand. "You're burning out," they'd said. "Take a week. Clear your head. Don't bring the laptop." He'd brought the laptop, obviously. What he hadn't planned for was nearly falling flat on his face the moment he stepped into the stables. "Whoa, careful, city boy," a voice shouted. A hand grabbed his arm, small, calloused, and strong, and yanked him upright. Graham looked up and met a pair of sharp, green eyes beneath a dusty ball cap. The woman standing in front of him was in faded jeans, a tank top smudged with dirt, and a pair of worn boots that looked like they'd seen more years than most of his employees. "Thanks," he muttered, brushing off his shirt. She crossed her arms. "These stables aren't a runway. Maybe don't wear Italian loafers next time. I wasn't planning on stepping in horse crap today." "Well, it's a ranch. Welcome to the wild." She extended a hand. "Lena Sawyer, head trainer." He paused, then shook it. "Graham Jennings." Her brow arched. "You the one from New York?" He nodded. "Figures. What's that supposed to mean?" She gave him a quick once-over. "You look like a man who thinks silence is a waste of time. I think inefficiency is a waste of time. Same thing around here." She turned and walked toward a tall, caramel-colored horse, her braids swaying behind her. Graham blinked, still trying to figure out if he'd just been insulted or flirted with. Probably both. He followed, ignoring the way his shoes squished in the mud. A ranch assistant handed him a schedule: basic activities, mealtimes, riding lessons. "I don't do horses," Graham said flatly. Lena overheard and glanced over her shoulder. "You do now. I'm not here for pony rides." She clipped the lead rope to the horse's bridle. "Good, because this guy's not a pony. His name's Blaze. He doesn't like bankers. I'm not a banker. Same difference." He blinked. "I run a billion-dollar tech company." She didn't even flinch. "Cool. I train horses that throw grown men." For some reason, that made his chest tighten. The first riding lesson was humiliating. Blaze didn't move until Lena gave a quiet whistle. And when he finally did, it was like being launched forward by a rocket with hooves. Graham cursed under his breath, clutching the reins like they were his last lifeline. "You're stiff," Lena called from the fence. "Loosen up. I'm trying not to die. Relax or he'll throw you." "This is relaxing?" By the time he dismounted barely, he was sweating through his shirt, his pride bruised worse than his thighs. Lena was grinning. "Not bad for a city guy. Remind me never to try that again." "You'll be back tomorrow." "No, I won't." "Yes, you will." He didn't answer, but the next morning he showed up. Same boots, new shirt, and this time a bottle of water in hand. Lena raised a brow. "Look at you. Learning." "I adapt quickly." "You're still riding, Blaze." "I figured." The second day was better. He didn't fall. He didn't yell. Lena rode beside him for a bit, correcting his posture, guiding him through the trail. At one point, she really laughed, and the sound cut through the quiet woods like sunlight. "You're not horrible when you're not talking. You're not terrible when you're not insulting me." She laughed again. "Fair." By dinner, he was exhausted. The ranch served home-cooked meals in a big dining hall, wooden beams, candles, and mismatched chairs. Graham sat across from Lena, who was devouring a plate of ribs like she hadn't eaten in days. "You're not like I expected," he said finally. "Because I have dirt on my hands and don't care about stocks?" "No, because you say exactly what you think." She held his gaze. "So do you. But I bet you don't do it as often as people think." He didn't answer. After dinner, they walked back toward the stables. The sun was setting, casting gold and pink across the horizon. Lena leaned against the fence, arms folded. "You ever slow down?" she asked quietly. "I don't know how." She looked at him, really looked. That must be exhausting. He didn't know why, but her words hit somewhere deep. Somewhere he didn't let anyone touch. "I don't usually let people say that kind of thing to me." Well, I'm not people, she said softly. He stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. No, you're not. The tension crackled between them. But she turned first, heading toward the barn. See you tomorrow, city boy. He stood in the fading light, unsure what the hell had just happened. He was supposed to be here for a break. Not to feel like his heart had just been kicked awake by a pair of green eyes and worn-out boots. On the third morning, Graham woke to silence. Not the curated silence of noise-canceling glass or penthouse insulation, but the kind that came from being so far from the city that even his thoughts sounded louder. The sun hadn't fully crested the hills yet, but light filtered through the wooden blinds, casting soft gold across the quilt Lena had tossed onto his cabin bed the night before without a word. It still smelled faintly of cedar and something like clove. He sat on the edge of the bed, phone dark in his hand. No bars. No emails. No distractions. He didn't know what disturbed him more, that he missed the chaos of his usual mornings or that he didn't. By the time he walked into the barn, Lena was already brushing down Blaze, her sleeves rolled up, a whisper of sweat on her collarbone. You're early, she said without looking up. I couldn't sleep. Nightmares. Worse. Quiet. She glanced at him, then pausing. You're not very practiced at stillness, are you? I'm not very practiced at wasting time. Stillness isn't wasting. It's noticing. He leaned against the stable door, watching her hands move across the horse's flank. What do you notice all day? More than most people ever stop to see, she said. Like how Blaze only flinches when someone lies. Graham narrowed his eyes. You think horses can tell when people lie? I know they can. She looked at him directly now. And you've been lying to yourself since the day you stepped off that car. He crossed his arms. I didn't come here for therapy. I didn't offer therapy, she replied, hanging the brush. I offered you a horse that doesn't tolerate liars. There's a difference. He didn't respond and she didn't push. Instead, she motioned toward the saddle. Get up. We're going into the hills today. The trail she led him on twisted through dense trees and opened into a rise overlooking the valley. The air was cool up there, and the grass hadn't yet lost its morning dew. Lena dismounted first, tying Blaze loosely to a post. Graham followed, slower but with more confidence than the day before. She handed him a thermos from her satchel. Coffee. Not your overpriced stuff, but it does the job. He took a sip. It was strong, a little bitter, and hotter than expected. You always carry coffee into the hills? Only when I know someone's going to need it more than I do. Graham studied the horizon. You grew up here? She nodded, sitting on a rock. This land's been in my family since before Texas had roads. My grandfather built the first cabin. My parents ran the retreat until they passed. Now it's just me and the land. He lowered himself onto the grass beside her. All of this. You run it alone. Not alone. I've got hands, seasonal help. But the decisions, the repairs, the balance sheet. She gave a small shrug. That's mine. He glanced at her again. You don't strike me as someone who cares about balance sheets. I don't strike most people right, she said. But I care. I just don't need to talk about it over cocktails and spreadsheets. I fix what breaks. I pay what's owed. I keep it all breathing. That's business too. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. They sat in silence for a moment until she asked, What made you start your company? He hesitated. My father ran a failing hardware store. I watched him work himself into the ground trying to keep it alive. I hated watching him lose everything because he didn't adapt. So I built something no one could take from me. And now I build and protect. And when something threatens it, I destroy it. She didn't flinch. Sounds lonely. It is. The breeze shifted, carrying the scent of wild sage. Lena leaned back on her hands, eyes closed. You know, sometimes things break for a reason. Not everything's meant to be rebuilt. That's not how I think. Maybe that's the problem. They rode back in silence, save for the birds overhead and the occasional chuff of Blaze's breath. When they reached the barn, Graham dismounted without help this time. Lena reached for Blaze's reins, but Graham stopped her. I've got it. She raised a brow but backed off. Suit yourself. He led Blaze into the stall and removed the saddle, his movements slow but sure. Lena watched from the doorway, arms folded across her chest. "You're not faking it anymore," she said quietly. "Faking what?" "Being someone who doesn't care about this." "I never said I didn't care." "No. But you act like it." He looked at her, the space between them suddenly heavier than before. "You challenge people without asking permission. I don't need permission to tell the truth. I'm not used to being spoken to like this." "Well," she said, voice softer now, "maybe it's time you got used to someone who doesn't want anything from you." He stepped forward, the wooden floor creaking beneath his boots. "You think people only want things from me? I think people see what they can take. I just see someone who's forgotten how to give." He stared at her for a long moment. Then, without thinking, he reached up and brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her breath caught, but she didn't move. Neither did he. Then the sound of hooves in the distance broke the moment. Someone was approaching on horseback and Lena stepped back. "You've got fence duty tomorrow," she said, clearing her throat. "I'll show you how to check the lines." "I thought I was here to relax." "You are. This is what relaxing looks like out here." She turned and walked away before he could respond. But as Graham stood there, alone in the barn with the scent of hay and leather and her perfume still lingering in the air, he realized something that unsettled him far more than the silence ever had. He wasn't just relaxing. He was starting to want to stay. Graham tightened the wire with gloved hands, the cold bite of the metal tugging back against him. Lena stood a few feet away, holding the post steady as he secured the last loop. The sun was high, the sky blindingly blue, and sweat clung to the back of his neck despite the cool wind rolling across the hills. "You're getting better at this," she said without looking up. He adjusted the tension, dust coating his jeans. "You sound surprised." "I'm not. You're just the type who hates being bad at anything. I don't like to waste time learning things I won't use again." "Well," Lena said, brushing her hands off on her jeans, "that's assuming you'll leave." He paused. "Am I supposed to stay?" "That's not a question I can answer for you." She walked ahead, boots crunching over dry grass. Graham followed, eyes drawn to the horizon where the land stretched on without end. There was a stillness here, but not the kind he'd once feared. The stillness pulsed. It breathed. They reached the western ridge, where a rusted gate leaned at an awkward angle. Lena stepped onto the bottom rung and leaned over to examine the hinge. "Storm knocked it loose last spring," she said. "I've been meaning to fix it." "Why didn't you?" "Other things came first." Graham knelt beside the post, inspecting the damage. "This whole ranch is held together by your stubbornness, isn't it?" She smiled faintly. "That and duct tape." He stood, brushing his hands on his thighs. "Any reason you never brought in a partner?" "I've had offers. Developers mostly. But they want to turn this into wedding venues and wine tours. Forget the horses, forget the history. You turned them down. I'd rather lose money than lose who I am." He studied her. "That's a luxury most people can't afford." "Maybe. But I'm not most people." "Clearly." She turned to him, eyes narrowing slightly. "Are you trying to understand me, Graham, or are you trying to decide if I'm worth fixing?" "I don't fix people." "Then what do you do when they don't fit your world?" He hesitated. "I usually walk away." "Then maybe that's why you're still alone." The words landed like a punch wrapped in silk. Graham looked at her, really looked. The wind swept her hair back, revealing the faint line of a scar beneath her ear. He hadn't noticed it before. "What happened there?" he asked. She touched the spot absently. "Wild colt. A few years back. Threw me into a fence. Split me open. Why keep working with animals that can hurt you?" "Because they're honest about it." He stepped closer. "You ever let anyone in, Lena?" Her jaw tightened. "Not often." "Why?" "Because people leave. Or worse, they stay long enough to ruin everything." He took another step, closing the space between them. "I'm not here to ruin anything. You're here to escape your own life." "Maybe. But that doesn't mean I don't see this one." She didn't move. "You don't belong here." "Maybe not. But I don't think I belong back there either." Silence stretched. Then she turned and walked back toward the barn, her pace faster than before. Graham followed, the wind at his back. That night, he didn't go to the main house for dinner. Instead, he wandered back to the hilltop alone, where the stars burned brighter than he'd ever seen. He sat on a flat patch of earth, elbows on his knees, and stared at the sky. He hadn't checked his phone in 3 days. He hadn't opened his laptop since he arrived. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was falling behind. The crunch of footsteps behind him broke the quiet. He didn't have to look to know it was Lena. "I thought you went home," he said. "I saw your light. Thought I'd make sure you weren't eaten by coyotes." He glanced over. She held a blanket in her arms. Without a word, she draped it over his shoulders and sat beside him. They watched the stars in silence for what felt like hours. "When I was a kid," Lena said finally, "my mom used to bring me up here to watch the meteor showers. Said the sky was the only place big enough to carry the kind of dreams that scared us." Graham looked at her. "What scares you now?" "Losing this place. You're not alone in it anymore." She turned to face him, her eyes cautious. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying, maybe I don't want to walk away." Her voice dropped. "You don't even know what staying would mean. Then tell me." She searched his face as if trying to find the cracks. "It means early mornings. Hard work. No boardrooms. No headlines. Just land and sweat and a life that doesn't care about titles." He leaned in. "That doesn't sound so bad. It's not the kind of life you built." "No," he said. "But maybe it's the kind I can build now." She didn't speak. Instead, she reached up, her fingers brushing his jaw. His hand covered hers. When she pressed her lips to his, it wasn't cautious. It was like the wind itself paused to watch. It was fierce, rooted, and filled with a quiet desperation neither of them wanted to name. When they pulled apart, she didn't move away. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "Not yet," he said. And for the first time since arriving, he didn't feel like a man running. He felt like one arriving. By the 6th morning, Graham no longer needed a guide to find his way through the pastures. He knew which gates stuck, which posts leaned too far to be trusted, and which paths held the softest stretches where Blaze's hooves barely made a sound. At sunrise, Lena was already outside the barn, stacking bags of feed onto a flatbed. She didn't look up when he joined her, just handed him a pair of gloves. "Truck's loaded. We've got to make the delivery to the south field before the rain hits." He took the gloves without a word. They worked in sync, now quiet rhythm, shared pace. When the truck bumped down the gravel road, she drove with one hand out the window, the other steady on the wheel. The clouds rolled in low and fast, but neither of them mentioned it. Graham glanced over. "After this week, what happens?" She didn't answer at first. A cow wandered into the road ahead and she slowed, letting it pass. "You go back to New York. I stay here. Sky keeps turning. I didn't ask what's supposed to happen. I asked what you want." Lena pulled the truck over near the old fencing shed. The rain hadn't started yet, but the wind was heavy with it. She got out, slammed the door, and walked toward a row of stacked hay bales. Graham followed. "I want this place to last," she said finally. "I want to stop counting every dollar before I breathe. I want to wake up and not wonder what I'll have to sell next to keep everything from falling apart." He stepped in front of her. "What if I could help?" She shook her head. "You think this is about money?" "No. I think it's about you not trusting anyone to stay." She looked up, eyes hard. "Because no one ever has. I'm not them. You're still leaving. Not if you ask me to stay." The rain started, light at first, then stronger. She didn't move. Neither did he. "You think I'm going to fall into your life like some project you can fix between board meetings?" "No," Graham said. "I think I'd walk away from all of it if you gave me a reason." She blinked, and something in her expression cracked. "I never needed saving," she said. "I know," he replied. "But maybe I did." She exhaled slowly. "You'd hate it here after a month. I've hated plenty of things. I've never hated waking up beside you. You haven't yet. Then let me." The rain grew heavier, soaking through her shirt, darkening the brim of his hat. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. "I can't promise this is going to be easy," she said. "The land breaks people. Then we'll rebuild each other. Lena stared at him for a long time before she leaned in, pressing her lips to his again, not fierce this time, but slow and certain, like something finally choosing to stay instead of run. That night, they didn't go back to their separate cabins. They made dinner together in the main house kitchen, Graham chopping vegetables with clumsy precision while Lena stirred stew on the stove. "I never pictured you barefoot," he said, glancing down at her sock-covered feet. "I never pictured you cooking. I'm full of surprises." Apparently. After dinner, they sat by the fireplace, her head resting on his shoulder, the dog curled up at their feet, and thunder grumbling outside like a distant memory. He shifted slightly. "I've been thinking. Dangerous." He smiled. "What if I invested in the ranch?" Her head lifted. "Graham, I don't mean by it. I mean partner with you. Quietly. No press. No big changes. Just the money to fix what's breaking and give it room to breathe. And in return, I get to stay. Help. Build something that doesn't ask me to be what I was." She studied him. "And if I say no?" He met her eyes. "Then I stay anyway. As long as you'll have me." She didn't speak for a long moment. Then she stood, walked to the old sideboard, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to him. "What's this?" "List of everything broken, about to break, or too expensive to replace. I wrote it 3 years ago. Updated it every few months. Never showed it to anyone." He unfolded it slowly. The entries were written in neat, looping script: barn roof, electric fencing, irrigation lines, solar panels. He looked up. "This is a start. It's a lot. I like a challenge." She took the paper back, folded it once, then slid it into his jacket pocket. "Then welcome to the hardest job you'll ever love." They didn't talk more that night. They didn't need to. In the weeks that followed, Graham didn't return to New York. He called in from the porch on Wednesdays, his laptop balanced on a hay bale, chickens roaming in the background. The board was stunned but not surprised. He sounded sharper than he had in months. Lena didn't change for him. She still rose before dawn, still cleaned stalls herself when no one else did, still challenged him every time he defaulted to control. But she let him in. And he stayed. When spring came, they hosted a fundraiser at the ranch. Local families, old friends, even a few influencers who'd heard rumors of a tech mogul turned ranch hand. Graham wore boots that were finally scuffed. Lena wore her hair loose. As the sun dipped low and music rose from the speakers hung between the trees, he pulled her into a slow dance near the barn. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think success meant never stopping. And now I think it means finding something you'd stop everything for." She leaned into him, her voice barely a whisper. "Good. Because I don't plan on letting you go." He tightened his arms around her, the scent of lavender and leather between them. "I already gave you everything," he said. "You just didn't take it all at once." She looked up, eyes full of something warm and solid. "Then let's build a life we don't need to run from." And they did. The morning sun filtered through gauzy curtains, casting pale gold across the bedroom floorboards. Graham sat at the edge of the bed, buttoning a shirt Lena had never seen him wear before: linen, soft blue, sleeves rolled up just enough to show a silver cufflink glinting at his wrist. He looked different now, not just in clothes or posture, but in the way he moved, less rigid, more rooted. "You don't have to do this," Lena said from the doorway, arms crossed but as softer than her tone. Graham looked up, adjusting his collar. "I want to. I need to." She stepped into the room, barefoot, still in one of his old shirts that hung too long at the sleeves. "You haven't been to the city in weeks. You sure you remember how to swim with the sharks?" "I'm not going to swim," he said, standing. "I'm going to drain the tank." He had spent the past 3 nights drafting his resignation, not from the company but from the life that came with it. The board would see it as reckless. He saw it as rescue. Lena watched him gather the last of the papers he'd printed out the night before. "You're really going to walk away from all of it?" He turned to her. "I'm not walking away. I'm walking towards something better." She didn't stop him from kissing her before he left. She didn't ask him not to go. And when he drove off in the truck she'd once used to haul hay, she didn't cry. She trusted him to come back this time. The flight to New York was quiet. No laptop, no assistant, no schedule. Just a man in a linen shirt carrying a folder and an answer to a question he hadn't known he was asking until the moment he met her. The boardroom was exactly as he remembered, polished, sterile, filled with voices that spoke in margins and market shares. They expected a pitch. They got a farewell. "I'm not selling the company," Graham said calmly. "I'm just done pretending I need to stay at the helm to protect it. You've got the tools. I've put systems in place. Now let me go." There were arguments, disbelief, even veiled threats. But Graham stood firm. "I built this to last without me. Now I'm going to prove it by living without it." He left the folder on the table and walked out without looking back. Back at the ranch, Lena was in the workshop sorting through old tools when she heard the truck tires crunch over gravel. She didn't move right away. Just listened, heart thudding. The door opened. Footsteps approached. Then his voice, low and steady. "I told them I was done. Walked out before they could talk me out of it." She turned to face him. "You really did it," she said. "I did," he answered. "Because I want to build something real. Here. With you." He stepped closer, pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box. Her breath caught. "Graham, I've had this for a while," he said, opening it to reveal a ring. "But I wanted to give it to you when the choice wasn't between two lives. Just one." Stillness stretched between them. Not hesitation. Just the weight of something big and right. "I don't need a ceremony," she whispered. "Just a life that feels like ours." "Then marry me," he said, "under the sky you love, on the land that holds your heart. No ties. No press. Just us." She nodded, smile blooming slow and wide. "Yes." Later that month, they stood under the old oak near the western ridge. No chairs, no aisle, just a few close friends, the horses grazing nearby and the sun slipping low behind the hills. Lena wore a dress she'd sewn herself, simple cotton, bare shoulders, her hair braided with wildflowers. Graham wore boots and a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, hands steady as he lifted her ring into place. "I never thought I'd find peace in chaos," she said. "And I never thought I'd find home outside a skyline." They kissed as the wind danced around them, scattering petals across the grass. Seasons passed. The ranch grew not bigger, just stronger. Graham helped install solar panels, repaired irrigation lines, and built a new barn where Lena trained rescues. He still advised the company remotely, but never from an office. Always from the porch or the field or the passenger seat of the truck while Lena drove one-handed. They adopted a dog that refused to listen to anyone but Lena and a goat that followed Graham everywhere. The kitchen always smelled like cinnamon and coffee. Their bed was always unmade by morning. On a quiet Sunday, Lena sat on the porch swing, a little boy asleep on her chest, dark-haired and peaceful. Graham stepped out carrying a mug of tea and sat beside her. "He looks like you," she whispered. "I hope he gets your stubbornness." "He already has." They rocked slowly, the wood creaking beneath them, the sky wide and open overhead. "Do you miss it?" she asked softly. "The city?" "No. The life before this." He looked at her, then at the child in her arms and the land stretching out ahead. "Not for a second." And they stayed. Together. Always.